Hello and welcome to Criminal History. If you like the video, please like, subscribe and comment. A psychopath is commonly used derogatorily to describe someone with irrational and chaotic actions. But perhaps this could not be further from the truth. Not to be confused with sociopaths, psychopaths are methodical and calculated. They do not partake in strange outbursts or erratic behaviours for one reason alone. They have very little, if any, emotions. This means emotional outbursts of anger, desperation or jealousy do not exist, or they are at least extremely rare. As described by Psychology Today, psychopathy is characterised by a lack of empathy. They have no remorse or guilt for anything they do, meaning they have no problem stealing or manipulating other people for their own gain. This is also why they are more inclined towards criminality, as they have no remorse for their actions and little fear. Some of the characteristics of a psychopath include glibness or superficial charm, having a grandiose sense of self-worth, a need for stimulation, proneness to boredom, pathological lying, conning, manipulative nature, lack of remorse or guilt, shallow affect, which means reduced emotional responses, having a callous lack of empathy, living a parasitic lifestyle, poor behavioural controls, promiscuous sexual behaviour, early behavioural problems, lack of realistic long-term goals, impulsivity, irresponsibility, failure to accept responsibility for one's own actions. They have many short-term marital relationships, juvenile delinquency and criminal versatility. It has been estimated that around 1% of the male population are psychopaths. This means in a group of 100 men, one of them is likely to be a psychopath. The percentage of females ranges from 0.3 to 0.7%. There is both a genetic and environmental element to a person becoming a psychopath. This is often known as nurture versus nature. Defects in the brain, in particular the amygdala, has been shown in psychopaths. According to forensic psychologist Michael Stone, the amygdala is part of the primitive brain known as the limbic system. This is part of what regulates emotion. The amygdala is part of what helps us recognise fear in people, picking up facial expressions and other cues. Psychopaths have a damaged amygdala. Frighteningly, this means they recognise fear in other people, but they feel no concern or empathy about it. Therefore, they are able to use people's fear against them, manipulating it for their own benefit. Also, the lower front of the brain, called the orbital frontal cortex, helps us in moral decision making. It allows us to decide what is right and what is wrong. A defect in this part of the brain means there is no conscience, no angel on the shoulder telling you not to do something, even if you desire it deeply. A psychopath simply does what they want when the feeling takes over them. Of course, they are not stupid. If they feel they may get caught or arrested, hence the act does not benefit them, they won't do it. But ethics or morality do not enter the thought process. It is also the anterior cingulate cortex that helps with decision making and reasoning in a more logical way. This part of the brain weighs up the pros and cons of an act. Some have described it as an internal jury deciding if you should or should not do something. Now, if this part of the brain is weak, it will give the go-ahead for action by sending signals to the orbital frontal cortex. They do not think of the repercussions of an action when this is damaged, even in a selfish way. For example, the threat of arrest does not worry them. If all three are damaged, there is no empathy, no conscious, and no logical decision making to put the brakes on. This creates a runaway train of impulsive actions for personal gain, devoid of guilt. Brain trauma has long been associated with serial killers, and perhaps brain injuries are partly responsible for their repulsive crimes. Most of the world's worst serial killers have suffered substantial brain injuries, mostly in their childhoods. This includes Fred West, Richard Ramirez, Dennis Rader, Henry Lee Lucas, who was clinically proven to have abnormalities in the prefrontal cortex, Peter Sutcliffe, whose brain was starved of oxygen when he was born prematurely, Ed Gein, Albert Fish, David Berkowitz, John Wayne Gacy, and even more still. Many people interviewed about serial killers they knew talk about how that person changed dramatically after a head injury. Fred West is perhaps the most notable example, who had a serious motorbike accident damaging his brain. This altered personality, triggered by brain damage, has gotten more attention recently thanks to the NFL. Football players who have suffered concussions have developed CTE. This is a type of brain damage that has been shown to alter a person's personality. It has symptoms such as a lack of impulse control, poor decision making and aggression. It has been speculated that CTE played a part in the familicide of Chris Benoit and his family. His brain was studied after death and it showed severe damage. Also, the young NFL player Aaron Hernandez, who threw his life and career away to commit murder, likely had CTE. Also, in the combat sports world, many former fighters end up becoming very erratic, impulsive, depressed, or even dangerous. Though there are genetic risk factors, there is also an environmental aspect. For example, even during pregnancy, the formation of a psychopath may already have started. According to psychopathyis.org, smoking during pregnancy, a highly stressed pregnancy, and complications at birth can increase the likelihood of psychopathy. Also, a lack of a warm, nurturing parent can lead to psychopathy, as they are not taught how to love in that crucial developmental age of childhood. Neglectful, absentee, or abusive parents can create a cold-hearted child devoid of emotion or empathy. This goes beyond merely taking care of a child's base needs such as shelter and nutrition. Responsive parenting behaviours include, for example, expressing concern through your face and voice, asking questions, or offering a hug if your child is upset. Children at risk or showing signs of psychopathy actually need more love and affection than a normal child. They may resist more, but this is why it is crucial. They are yet to understand why it is important and so reject it. If a parent allows this to happen, it just enforces the idea that affection and love does not matter. Jordan Peterson has stated that the most important years of a person's development are the period of 0 to 4 years. He states that 2-year-olds are the most aggressive age group, as kids of this age can be incredibly violent to each other. Although most are not aggressive, a substantial amount compared to any other age group are. Of course, they are mostly young boys. However, by the age of 4, most of these hyper-aggressive children become civilized to fit in and behave appropriately with other children. This is largely due to children socializing with each other and being allowed to perform rough and tumble play with each other. Part of this is becoming aware of their limits to pain and danger. It allows them to see the effects of violent actions and teaches them not to do it to others. Animal studies in rats have shown that not allowing them to perform this aggression regulating rough and tumble play creates defective prefrontal cortexes. Psychopathy is not always a negative trait, depending on how you see success. For example, Forbes, using experts in the field, have calculated that between 4 and 12% of all CEOs are psychopaths. It seems psychopathy is a recipe for success in the world of business. They have no guilt about throwing people under the bus or manipulating people to climb the ranks, even if it means hurting the feelings of others. That simply is not an emotion they feel. Now, this has extremely worrying consequences, especially as a handful of companies in the world own everything in every sector. There may be an illusion of choice, but that's all it is. The biggest companies are run by even bigger companies in the shadows. Having a heartless CEO at the top of these businesses with no humanity is terrifying. The only thing they care about is their own personal success. They don't care who or what they have to harm to get there. This is especially worrisome in the US that has been proven to be run by big business. A study by Princeton University professor Martin Gillens and Northwestern University professor Benjamin Page assert that the US is no longer a democracy and is now an oligarchy. Decision making is done by powerful elites at the head of businesses, thus proving the theory of a shadow government or an Illuminati running things from behind the scenes. Indeed, the Bilderberg Group, a collection of world business leaders, meet once a year to decide the agenda of the preceding year. And even if we believe that politics is a true democracy and not dictated to by mega corporations, it is surprise to no one that much like CEOs, politicians are more likely to be psychopathic. Anyone above the age of 10 knows that politicians lie. Whilst trying to get elected, they brazenly stand up and promise policies they know they are never going to follow through with. Furthermore, they lie to make themselves look better and lie about world events. No morals, no dignity or shame is shown whatsoever. They know they are lying, we know they are lying, and we all play the charade where we pretend we believe them.
I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Went back to law school and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only needed 123 credits.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class. that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named Outstanding Political Science Student in college.
Newsweek said,
I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
On Tuesday night, I gave the order for British forces to take part in military action in Iraq. Tonight, British servicemen and women are engaged from air, land and sea. Their mission? To remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
Psychopaths are almost the perfect actors. They are often aware of their own lack of emotions and robotically copy and mimic that of others around them. Often their actions appear more genuine than the people actually feeling the emotions. This is perfectly illustrated in the TV series Dexter, in which he has to instantly think, plan and commit to an emotional response when faced with everyday scenarios.
Maybe if I don't blink, my eyes will tear up. I hate this. I'm questioning every move. It's exhausting. I should just break it off already. Unless I can pacify her. Give her something.
They are also not triggered by fear. This is also why lie detector tests are all but useless for identifying a psychopathic killer. So many serial killers have passed these tests because their baseline is the same as when asked challenging questions. They don't sweat more, they don't have an elevated heart rate. They are completely unchanged and cold-hearted. Dr. Martha Stout, a clinical psychologist who is long affiliated with Harvard Medical School and author of The Sociopath Next Door, stated in Huffington Post, "Politicians are more likely than people in the general population to be sociopaths. I think you would find no expert in the field of sociopathy, psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder who would dispute this. That a small minority of human beings literally have no conscience was and is a bitter pill for our society to swallow. But it does explain a great many things, shamelessly deceitful political behaviour being one. Perhaps, like when you joined the armed forces, politicians should be psychologically screened. In particular, they should be screened for empathy before being allowed into government. Maybe this way a more harmonious society would emerge, where the heads of state, with world-ending bombs at their fingertips, have a conscience. This is also worrying in the healthcare industry. We rely on pharmaceutical companies to provide us with the best medicine to keep us fit and healthy. But what if pharmaceutical companies can make easy money by promoting a product they have made, even if it has been deemed unsafe? Such was the case of Pfizer, the company many people are currently relying on for you know what. In 2009, they were forced to pay a settlement of $2.3 billion for promoting a drug that had been deemed unsafe by the FDA. The drug in question was a painkiller named Bextra, and it was not approved for use. They also had to settle a number of civil lawsuits for bribing doctors to promote their products. Also, in the 1980s, the German company Bayer knowingly sold blood clotting agents that were infected with HIV to Asia and Latin America. They were forced to pay $600 million in lawsuits. This was the company that made Zyklon B during World War II, and also who sponsored Joseph Mengele and his human experiments. They would supply drugs to be tested in human trials. Trials were performed in Dachau, Buchenwald and Auschwitz. In some scenarios, the lack of fear can be extremely beneficial, appearing heroic. For example, a psychopath could run into a burning building to save someone, or risk their life to save someone in a wartime situation. However, rather than doing this out of love or empathy for others, they are simply not afraid. This is also why psychopaths are likely to commit crime. They have no moral compass and do not fear consequences. So, if an opportunity presents itself which will benefit them, they will take it. Depending on the source you use, the rate of psychopathy in prison ranges from around 10 to 30%. Dr. Jonathan Pincus, Chief of Neurology at VA Hospital in Washington, D.C., stated in the documentary series Most Evil that he had the recipe to create a violent killer. He believed the creation of violent psychopaths could be put down to three things: abuse, brain damage, and mental illness. As already stated, the brain damage stops a person controlling their impulses and aggression. Dr. Pincus, for example, found cysts in the right temporal lobe of serial killer Arthur Shawcross. Many serial killers also have severe mental illness, hallucinations from God telling them to kill, for example. This is where they transition from badness to madness. They simply do not know they are doing wrong. The truly evil killers, however, know right from wrong and do it anyway. Neurological damage and mental illness impairs judgment and impedes impulse control. Abuse gives them the rage behind violent acts. Abuse is the driving motivator of violence. More moral killers become vigilantes, targeting adults who harm other children. However, all too often, innocent victims are harmed instead. Virtually every single serial killer has a horrific past where they were brutalised, verbally or physically, and sometimes both. This is why that early developmental stage that Jordan Peterson talked about is crucial. If one does not learn love, and if one does not learn to control aggression and violence, they may become antisocial psychopaths. It is also why so many men target women. It is often directly linked to their childhood and the abuse they sustain from their mothers. Arthur Shawcross, who had all three ingredients of violent psychopathy, was violently and sexually abused by his mother. Ed Kemper also was verbally abused and humiliated by his mother as a child.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there?
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. And I watched the alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre. She had terrible pain from her life, earlier life, her upbringing, a failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure. I hate to distill it down into such into one-word realities like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it.
Charles Manson was also severely neglected by his mother. His mother once sold him for a bottle of beer. The victimized child grows up wanting vengeance. When he gets it through violence, he becomes empowered. This is how serial killers are created. Dr. Pincus believes if you put all three ingredients together, it will guarantee a violent serial killer. However, psychopathic killers are different in that they are not mentally ill. They are more grandiose and enjoy the killings. They are mentally stable and able to blend in like the BTK killer who was married and had a family. This is the most frightening thing about psychopaths. Many do not become killers. They blend in among us. We trust them, we let them into our lives, and bit by bit the monster reveals itself. With every selfish, uncaring deed, the mask slips, and the monster that lurks in the shadows is revealed.